Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome along to Data Platform Downunder for the month of April. This month, we've got John Miner talking to us about data engineering with Microsoft Fabric. Now, this session is being recorded and will be made available on the Data Platform Downunder YouTube channel, excuse me, once we're all done and dusted. If you haven't already subscribed to the YouTube channel, feel free to subscribe up to that and you'll get notifications of when we update all of the sessions that we do record. We will put that link into the chat window so that you're able to gain access to that at any point in time. So with that, during the session, if you do have any questions, put them in the chat window, okay? Both Martin and I will be monitoring that chat window and we'll be able to ask those questions for you to John throughout the session. Also during the session, as it is being recorded, if you want to just stay on mute and keep your camera off, otherwise you will be like us and have your lovely mugs recorded for eternity and up on the YouTube channel. So with that, I'll hand over to John and he can take us through today's session.
Excellent. Thank you, Warwick, for having me again. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm going to start sharing my screen. Awesome. So I'm going to jump around a little, but we'll start with the main page right here, and then I'm going to do some intros. So again, my name's John Miner. I am a data architect at Insight, so I'm still in presentation mode, and I do know that. I've been MVP. Hopefully this is MVP number 9. On and off being MVP because I worked for Microsoft for a couple of years. When I first met Martin said, "Hey, man, you're from England." I said, "No, I'm from New England." So that is the big difference. This is New England. It's in the United States, way up the top. And I'm in the smallest state, this little RI here. So if you can find that over there. One of these days, my friend Martin will come see me. He keeps on asking. And I told him I'm here. So with that said, let's go through some really some housekeeping, some more links after this presentation if you really like it, where to go, okay? So if you go GitHub and type John Miner 3, you can see all my presentations. Everything today I'm going to be talking about here, so there's a bunch of code. We'll be going over some SQL code. We'll be going over some Python notebooks. We'll go over some text files, which are just basically pipeline definitions. There's even an install for the pubs database. We'll talk about that. It's been rewritten for the new data warehouse that they have in Fabric. Okay. So go there and get all the stuff we have talked about tonight. I've been writing and doing Apache Spark on and off with data engineering, with ADF, whatever tool they, clients like. Again, sometimes I don't get to pick. So like I did some NiFi programming about 9 months ago. You'll probably have to look it up because NiFi is a real niche product. But looking here, we can see there's a bunch of articles on MS SQL tips. So I'm going to drop that there. I am writing for Steve Jones about Fabric. So I got 2 articles out there and there's 4 more to come, and I will be continuing to that post this year. So that's one of my to-dos. Okay, let's talk about why do I have this up here? Okay, well, let's close that. I was listening to some music. But Fabric, regardless of whether or not you're using Fabric itself or not, you might interact with other things, right? So there's some storage, there's an event hub here. We'll get more into that once we get into real time, okay? So let's go to a slide deck. There's some groundwork or foundation work we need to work on to talk about what is Fabric, what's the new features, what's the actual architectures, and then once we get through all of that, then we can actually do some demos, and that's the fun part, okay? One little more thing. Let me slide over. And I'm going to hide myself too, so you don't have to see me all this time. I will promise I will be back once. Let's do emit. And let's do hide camera. Come on. Nope, doesn't want to do the hide. Maybe because the sharing's on. Let's try this again. I apologize. Okay. I can do switch camera. Hide me. Well, it's good enough, I guess. Chat. Here we go. Sorry. It's too late at night. I definitely need to drink a little more coffee. So, gonna ask work. I'm not in presentation mode anymore, am I?
Oops. No, we can see your slide deck.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get this guy to go away. Perfect. Okay. Hey, audio visual is the hottest part about presenting. It's not the material. Okay, there we go. So what's the purpose, okay? I didn't look at Fabric until it actually went GA. In fact, I actually started looking at it in January for the MVP conference because I was holding off. I knew about Project Trident. That's its secret name that Microsoft came up with about 2 years ago. But the interesting thing was, sorry about that, keep on getting hit. Let's go back up one. So again, I knew about Project Trident 2 years ago, but it didn't go to GA. And usually even after it goes GA, there's bugs. I locked a bunch of them while I was out there kicking the tires on it. And this presentation came about from me, trying all the features that are out there, at least the ones I'm interested in. I don't do much data science. I wish I did.
John?
Yeah?
Sorry. Do you just want to reshare your slide deck?
The location of it or at the very beginning? Oh,
no,
it's not
no,
shared
just
at all?
in here, just share your slide deck.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Oh, okay, to stop sharing again, huh? Okay. I must have clicked the wrong one. I'm sorry. We can start over, unless you're in a hurry to go somewhere. Hi, present to view. Okay, so I'll do this one more time at the end, but at the very beginning, I went over some links for GitHub, okay, as well as, what I write about, MS SQL tips, and I'm starting to write for SQL Server Central. Again, my name's John Meyer. I'm an MVP, and I work for a company called Insight. I've been there almost 7 years. So again, Fabric went GA November 2023. I started looking at it in January, made the slide deck from it. There's 4 types of problems can be solved. There's a lake house. What is a lake house? That's Spark, right? We got a data lake, and guess what? You're gonna actually do something with it, and everyone's using Delta file format nowadays. Okay, data warehouse. I've had some pains with the Azure's SQL data warehouse in the past. You always had to worry about sharding. It had to be in like 60 little pieces, and then you always worried about hash key. Guess what? This is awesome. The new version of the data warehouse I really like. Okay, data science, I'm not going to talk about again. Like I said, I got a certificate in data science, and guess what? I haven't had a chance to use it. So it's just one of those things that I'm doing more data engineering and reporting. So that's where my bread and butter is. So that's where I'm staying. Last but not least, real-time analytics. If you have a real-time analytics use case, like, pulling in data and reporting it, that's awesome. Not a lot of people do. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to explore how you can use Fabric with your own organization, because, there is 4 types and there's different pieces that you can use. Okay. First thing, things have changed a lot. Okay. It is basically, Fabric is kind of like they took Synapse and put it in a blender with Power BI and a bunch of other things, and boom, you got Fabric. Knowing the architectural diagrams is going to help you on picking what you can do and how to do it. Okay, I'm going to talk about the one lake. The one lake is key, okay, to all the components, and we'll talk about how it is the foundation. The Delta table format is the foundation for everything. We'll talk about the data warehouse, and if we have time, we'll talk about real-time analytics. I did kick off a PowerShell script before we got on, and it's starting to actually load hypothetical made up data of students buying soda from a vending machine. Okay, and we can look at that data. Okay, so these are the architectural diagrams. I have a friend at Microsoft. I actually pillaged them from there. Why not, right? It's their marketing information. It's good enough to show clients, good enough to present with, right? And again, I have my own content, but this is just the boilerproof stuff that's out there of what it is. So one thing you're going to see is we got a bunch of new icons, but we got a lot of old stuff here too, right? We got Data Factory. That hasn't been anything really changed. I mean, there's been improvements, but I started with Data Factory about 7 years ago. Then it went to Synapse, right? Now it's in the Fabric. So you definitely need some way to copy data from on-premise hybrid, right, to the cloud. Data engineering, they call it Synapse, but it's just basically your workbooks, right? So you got a Python workbook or a SQL workbook. Data warehouse, again, they call it Synapse, but this is your SQL queries. Skipping over data science, real time. We're going to talk about KQL databases, and KQL is the Custo language, okay? We got Power BI in here, and we also have Data Activator. And I haven't talked about Data Activator, but it's kind of like Power Flow, right? It was kind of one of those things, if an action happens, like some data lands in this directory, go do something, right? Underneath this is basically a foundation, which is kind of consistent regardless of whatever service you're using. It's the same GUI, it's the same thing. So if you say, hey, something's not working and it's part of the UX, then it's a common UX. Okay. So these are the analyticals. We talked about the lake house, getting some data in the lake, a warehouse. So now we want SQL, not something in which we have to run Spark on. Data science, we're going to skip over, and real-time analytics. Okay, so let's talk about the lake house. And this is going to be a couple examples on this. So how do you get data into the lakehouse? And again, I do a lot of work with Databricks, and it's the same thing as here, right? We need some way to copy it over. And you only have a few things. Like even if I was doing Databricks, I might use ADF, right? Because more than likely, you know, your lake and your Databricks are going to be secured on a VNet, and you don't want anything to get in them, right? And this is the same thing. We can see right here, if you got unstructured, structured, you can use a pipeline to get it over. Now, what's interesting is that in prior versions of ADF, you had two types of data flows. You had something called a mapping data flow, which was kind of like a cut down version of SSIS. You drew things, you took a source, and like, hey, I filter or aggregate, and then you put it to a destination, right? So, you know, not as good as SSIS, I have to say, but kind of like that, right? And then you had something called wrangling data flows. And a wrangling data flow was the M language. It looked like Power BI or Power Query, right, really specifically. Out of the two, Power Query was the only one that survived. So if you have data flows or mapping data flows, there's no migration path to get them in here. You're going to have to rewrite them. There is something that's fabulous, and it's called shortcuts, and I really like shortcuts. I've had some difficulties testing out shortcuts, and I just haven't had time to get back to it. I've been busy with client work. But the interesting with shortcuts is we're kind of living in a disjointed data community or data, you know, basically meshed, right? And what we're trying to do is mesh all these things together. Like I might have some data in a Azure container. I might have some data in an S3 container. How can I get all that into the lakehouse? And it's really cool how the backend team, Josh's team, Kaplan, actually worked on, you know, they go ahead and they read the Parquet file and they cache it. And if you use it within 24 hours, it stays in the cache. And it's like awesome. It's like, you know, you're basically meshing data. So either way, if you're using a shortcut or a pipeline, we need to get it into the lake house, right, which is basically your data lake, do some transformation, and then we can put it in Power BI. So that's your first use case, the lake house. Second use case is the data warehouse. And like I said, this has changed radically. What's not there? The syntax is limited like most data warehouses, right? You can do a primary key or I don't think they're supported, tell you the constraints, if I remember, or if they are, they're not. Actually, they're just used as like sugar to tell syntax to the optimizer on what might be a key or not, right? So primary keys are pretty much, and foreign keys are usually not supported in such warehouses as this. So make sure your data goes in clean. There was a really cool command too that they finally got in here. I knew they put it in Synapse, but it's here too. It's called a copy into command. We'll talk about that. Again, you want to use pipelines and data flows and mounts. I haven't got a chance to look at mounts, but basically, you know, if you get the copy into, that's awesome. You can copy hundreds of files into a table using the copy command. We'll show that tonight. Again, skip over data science. It's a typical thing. You know, you clean it, you train it, you score. Okay, real-time analytics. this is where you must have something to pull from, right? So most people pull from like Event Hub, such as event streaming, right? You can also look at a directory and say, hey, you know what? Monitor anything that comes in this directory and pull it in real time, right? That'll get you into a Custo database, okay? And from that Custo database, you can write queries and notebooks. I think this area is a little immature, and ever going out to the MVP conference and not telling you what the roadmap is, the only thing I want to say is there's going to be a lot of work that's going to be happening in this area, okay? So if you think about, trying to do some work in this area, that's great, but do it with understanding that you might have to go back and rework it. Okay, so let's talk about the lakehouse, and this is our first really getting into the meats and talk about how to do things and maybe a demo. Is there any questions at this point?
Not yet, John.
Awesome, thank you, Work. Okay, so what is Apache Spark? What's a cluster? Medallion architecture, data ingestion, data engineering, and we're going to talk about 2 examples, okay? So this is some stuff that I stole from, I think, Databricks, because I've been talking about Databricks forever, but really hasn't changed, right? In the Apache Spark and the engine, you can do SQL and data frames, right? We're not going to talk about machine learning, but probably there you probably can get a graph frame. I haven't tried it in Fabric, but one would think it's out there, right? And it's also streaming. And also clusters, right? You have to worry about a cluster, right? You have to spin it up. The interesting thing is, guess what? They have something now that's even better than like Databricks clusters. It's called starter clusters. And basically, they're just sitting here. It's almost like serverless, right? And they have something called serverless in Databricks, but it's just for the SQL warehouse, not for the actual data themselves. And guess what? I was talking to a Databricks guy today because I got a client, and that's what I'm doing, Databricks. And guess what? They're coming out, they're trying to compete against Microsoft because Microsoft came out with something really awesome, right? Which means that the startup time of these clusters, which usually takes a long time, 3 to 5 minutes, last time I looked, about a minute and a half, you can actually stop doing some tasks because, that's the cluster. And once you start talking in the cluster and it was assigned to you, that starter cluster, then the response time is really low. And again, if you've ever done Spark in the past, most of the time you're sitting there waiting for the cluster to spin up and spin down. And you're always trying to optimize that with pools or different techniques. And this starter cluster from Microsoft is really cool. That's all I can say. Okay. So this is definitely a one lake diagram, and it's the medallion architecture. What is medallion? I've been talking about this for 5 years, and basically we just can either create a container and put security around the container, and that's probably the best way to do it, because if I make a container and put bronze, and guess what? I have all automated stuff dumping in bronze, and then silver, I'm the engineer and I give myself full access. And then gold, maybe Marty's my friend, you need some data, I give him limited access, right? Now we're securing it by different layers, okay? Also, it means I can kind of hide my dirty laundry, right? In bronze, which is kind of like, usually call it raw, you might have garbage data in there. You might have to do a lookup on the address to clean it. You might have to clean other things up, right? Silver, guess what? We got refined data, but it's not ready for reporting. Maybe we want a dimensional model at the end for reporting. Gold is where all our data is finally there, okay? And again, this brings in any type of data source, right? So if you can use ADF, which is the pipelines to copy it over, you can use REST API, whatever you can dream of, and there's access to, you can get into the lakehouse, okay? Last but not least, there's 2 things we can talk about, the SQL Analytics endpoint and the Power BI, okay? Everything you do in OneLake has a SQL Analytics endpoint. I haven't tried the Custo. Maybe Custo is probably the only one that doesn't have it, but the Lakehouse and the Warehouse definitely do, okay? And I think that's a good segue. So I'm going to do a quick demo, okay? I'm going to show you what Fabric looks like, and I'm going to show you how to talk to the SQL endpoint. So this is Fabric, okay? And, it has these little buttons on here on the side, so you just have to close them, and it looks like Power BI. That's what it is, basically. And right now I'm looking at the DW pubs, right? So I'm going to go home, And now I can say, hey, wow, there's a bunch of things I can do. I can say, hey, I want to create something new. And we could say, hey, it's a data activator. Maybe I want to do some data engineering. So lakehouse and notebooks, so on, a data flow, data science we talked about, data warehouse, so on. So you got all these options. But the main thing, if you already have existing stuff, which I do, right, is workspaces. And my workspace is where everything for me lives, okay? And you can see right here that I have a warehouse. I have a vending KQL, which is streaming. This is a VentureWorks. This is an S&P 500 database. So let's go ahead and look at the data through the SQL endpoint. You can see right here, this is a semantic model, but there's also usually a SQL Analytics endpoint. There's one here, and there's automatically one with the warehouse. To get to it, we just click on it and hit View Details, right? Right there's your connection string, copy it, okay? Now I'm going to go over to my VM, okay? Now remember Fabric, and this is what caught me when I first tried doing Fabric, okay? You need to have John at not Outlook.com, not Google.com, but a domain.com, okay? And so I was trying to use my crafty DBA Outlook account to spin up Fabric. It's not going to work. But John at crafty DBA worked. Now, when you log in, you just do a regular database connect, right? You connect to this, do your Active Directory with MFA, because everything now is secured with MFA, even if it's a own subscription. And then it'll prompt you for the MFA if you put the password in, and voila, we're in here. And this is the pub's database. And you can see, I'm looking at stocks data, right? And it's only the first, 1,000 rows. Let's do this. Let's do symbol. I'm just going to do a real quick one, and I'm just going to do a count where I'm going to do this. Don't know if this is a real year. This might not be a real year. So I'm going to try do substring. We'll see if this works. 1,4. Okay, and then this is as st_year. And then let's run this. Control execute. Why doesn't it like me? Did it get rid of it? Maybe I don't not connect anymore. Let's try this. Start again. Execute. Okay. Of course, now I'm showing the demo. It's going to break, but we'll see. Okay, there it's there. Now let's try this again. I don't know why it didn't like this. Oops. Right there. So, okay. Execute. Incorrect SD day. I thought I had this here, right? There we go. I made a mistake. I can't do it. And then data argument type is invalid for substring. So this must not be a string then. So what we'll do is we'll try, maybe it's a year. So we'll try the year of it, and then let's see if this works. Year function, yeah, it's not gonna like this. Okay, execute. Okay, cool. So basically I wanna know is how, for a given stock, how many, in fact, let's make it Microsoft, right? So where, right? st_symbol is equal to, right? And what is the symbol equal to? It's going to be Microsoft, right? So MSFT. It's probably in caps. Okay. And what I'm going to do is here, I'm going to change this to a group by and get a count. Okay. And then what I want to know is count how many days. Basically, it's going to tell me how many days trading was. So trading days. And then we'll go back to the presentation, but I thought this was a good little segue. Okay, so I'm going to do that and bring this down, copy this, and execute. And forgot commas, of course. Like I said, not enough coffee at this time. And then execute. Syntax. Oh yeah, group by. I didn't thought about it, but I didn't put it in. Group by. Let's execute again. There we go. So let's count. Boom. That was how many seconds? That was 2 seconds. Isn't that pretty cool? That's 2 seconds. That was originally 2,500 files. That's only 600,000 rows of data but it's a Parquet file. That's it. It's not a database. It's Parquet. Even though they say it's a data warehouse, they're just optimizing for Parquet. Now, do you believe me that they're just Parquet files, or does anyone want to debate me? The only reason why I was going to tell you that is there's another cool thing that came up, and we'll talk more about this. It's called the One Lake Explorer, okay? And what this allows you to do is it allows you to copy data from on-premise to the cloud if you have the rights, right? And so what we can do is we have the AdventureWorks Lakehouse, we have the S&P 500 Lakehouse, and we have the data ones. And we can go to tables in DBO, and whoops, we can't see it. They're obscuring the view, but it is probably, like I said, a Parquet format because that's all the documentation says. But say if we went to AdventureWorks and then we went to files, raw, we can see that these are the raw files for S&P 500. I don't know why there's nothing there. There should be something there. Maybe this hasn't been refreshed. Let me see. There is a sync button here. Sync from Round Lake. I'm going to let that go and we'll go back to the presentation. But again, the whole endpoint of it is the Lakehouse and the data warehouse can be done by the SQL Analytics endpoint. If you need to do something with Power BI, know what you have to do. And again, this is important before I get back to the demo, is that we went to MySpace. There's something right here called the semantic model, right? And if we click on this, okay, then what we can do is we can click the name and then get the semantic model. We have to actually go ahead and bring in fields, okay? So I always forget where it is, but I'll let you find that. But anyways, that's one semantic model. There's going to be one for each one. See, this copies off. There's going to be another semantic model right here too. It's this endpoint and then a semantic model. And you can do explore this data too. And then it's not showing me anything unless it's still thinking. I'll wait another minute. If it doesn't show up, I'll go back to it. But anyways, that is the SQL endpoint. This is the semantic endpoint, and this is where you have to go ahead and bring your tables in that you want part of the model that Power BI is going to look at, okay? So back to the presentation. I'm going to try to keep it on time too. So let's go back to the slide deck. Hide the presenter view. Okay, perfect. Minimize this down, and there we go. Okay, so data ingestion. Radicad, I stole a little diagram you did because I thought it was so cool. I'm giving him definitely the kudos for it. So data ingestion, data factory can copy from a variety of data from point A to point B. That's where your go-to butter is, right? I'd use data factory all the time. Shortcuts are new though, okay? And what they allow you to do is for data meshing, right? Basically, you copy it over into cache. It can be either Google Cloud Storage, Amazon S3. This is not working so well right now, so hopefully they get it fixed. Amazon S3 is rock solid, as well as ADLS Gen 2. And basically, you know, it stays in cache. If you use it right away, it doesn't go out of cache. You don't get another egress charge. If you're going back and forth to egress to it, you might get an egress charge, okay? Data gateway. It's always been the bread and butter for Power BI, but Power BI has always used a self-hosted integration runtime. That's going away. Everything's going to go to the gateway. Right now, when I talked 2 or 3 weeks ago to product group, they only had it for Power Query data flows. Hopefully it's coming in the near future for Azure Data Factory, okay? Data engineering. How can we do data engineering, right? Data Factory supports wrangling data flows, right? It's just like Power Query. You bring it in, you can select a field, not select a field. You can go ahead and you can, you know, take input and create an output. What's not good at is parameterization, okay? And so therefore, I'm really like doing everything with a regular pipeline, so a data pipeline, and use it parameterized, okay? And you can't parameterize as much as you used to, and I'll tell you why. because a lot of things are embedded now into the actual pipeline itself, the actual pipeline. And before you used to have, something called a link service and a data set, right? Or don't need to define those anymore. They're part of the data pipeline, okay? One of the things I do like about the notebooks, cluster startup really quickly, and parameterization's easy, and scaling, you can control it, okay? So examples, we got 2 examples. We're going to ingest some AdventureWorks data, right? We're going to show you a metadata-driven design. That's why I like using, because metadata-driven designs allow you to do a lot with a little code, okay? Mostly it's setting up a table. Use the pipelines and notebooks, and data is copied in one lake. We'll also show ingest stock data. So we're going to create a shortcut. Tables of files will suddenly appear, and we'll use some notebooks to transfer them. So we're going to talk about AdventureWorks. We're going to talk about S&P 500, okay? So we're going to go back here, and we're going to close this and go to my workspace. And we can see there's a bunch of things here, right? There's one that should say clear Hive tables right here, right? So what we want to do is we want to run that, okay? And we'll do AdventureWorks first. Okay. This is something that I talked to the product group, and they're going to have to fix, is that you can pin, okay, a notebook to multiple lake houses. And lake houses can be thought of as the Hive, right? So if we click into a lake house, we're going to see, wow, there's a ton of tables here, right? And these tables are just basically, there's 2 types of tables, managed, unmanaged. These are managed tables. These are stuck in the Hive somewhere. You don't get to see where it is, but has all the data, right? So this little notebook's going to help us clean up. It's going to say, hey, show me all the tables and collect it as a particular single list. And I'm just going to do for loop. And if I see it and it's metadata, I know I don't want to delete the metadata, skip that one, otherwise drop the table. If it's not a drop table, maybe it's a view, try dropping the view, okay? So I'm going to run this. And let's see how long this takes. So it took like 5 seconds, maybe 10 seconds total to actually get it. It's been running for 17 or 18 seconds. And so now it's starting to drop stuff, say. Awesome. So it's going to clear up our workspace. We're not going to have the Hive all cluttered. Then I'm going to show you how to load one table, and then we'll go ahead and run the metadata design to do all the tables, and then we'll get back to the next example. We'll kind of back and forth because there's a lot of stuff to cover. So this is all here, and if we hit refresh, right, we can see, oh, wow, everything except the metadata is gone. That's awesome, right? And if we click on metadata, it's there. Now, one thing that's kind of drives me nuts is, see, this is the one that we brought in here, right? So I can't see it there. But if I go over here and close this, right, now I'm out of there, and I go to AdventureWorks itself, and I click this, guess what? Now it's going to, if I wait long enough, it's actually doing a preview. It couldn't do that in the other one, but for some reason now it allows me to do it here. So just remember, certain views allow you to do certain things, and you just have to play around and figure out which one does it. Okay, what do we have for metadata? It's just a number from 1 to 11. We're given a path, okay? Well, the path, when we do /raw, right, is from files /raw, okay, so sales LT. And if we're number 1, we're going to the currency directory. Hey, guess what? Every time I run this, I'm going to put a new directory out here with the latest file, okay? And this is the file name. It's a CSV. There's no header. It's piped and limited. The table name I want to create is dim currency, either bronze or silver, right? And here's the actual, we call schema. This is the, column names and the data types, okay? Because remember, Hive is schema on read, okay? So the next thing is, you know what? We're going to have a notebook that will do most of this work for us. So let's look at browse, right? And if we look, notebook, full delimited, that's one, create metadata. So if you're curious, this was the create metadata table. So it just creates a table, says drop if exist, and then basically it does a bunch of inserts, nothing to write home about, okay? And at the very end, it just does a select, and this is all, if you see percent SQL, this is all Spark SQL, okay? Let's go back to my workspace, and I am looking for delimited full loan. That's the pipeline, delimited and full load right here. This is the one I'm looking for. So we do not have to run this through a pipeline. We can run it if there's data there, right? So this says, hey, guess what? Let's go through what this notebook does. Remember, there's different types of cells right here. This is just a regular Python cell. This is kind of like a markdown. I could have made a markdown, but I don't like markdown. Sometimes they get bloated and they mess up, so I just use regular comments. This right here is parameters. So this is actually passing from the notebook. I can pass the path, right, where it is, the currency, and we want a metadata drive this, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to say, and again, it depends on how you want to do it. In this one, I combined a few things and said, oh, I already have raw. I'm going to create bronze and I'm going to create silver. So the very first step would be to clean up and remove any definitions I had before, which I do. Next thing is we have to load the data into a data frame, right, before we do anything. So this is our path. We're going to strip any space there and say, hey, you know, this is our temp table. And we're going to say, is there a schema? And if there's a schema, then we're going to do one thing. We're going to, if not schema flag, then we don't have to pass it the schema. Otherwise, see the var schema is getting passed right here. We're reading the CSV. And then we're going to create this view. So basically, when you create a view, okay, once that view is created, we can go ahead and do anything you want like you would do in SQL. So I can say, guess what? Create table bronze as, so this is a C task, right? As select star. Okay, I want the current timestamp, so I want to know when I loaded it. Also, I want to know, because we did a recursive file lookup, it's reading the whole directory up, okay? So I want to know what folder it came from, and I want to know what file it came from. And guess what? This is a statement. I execute the statement, and I say, hey, guess what? It finished. Then the next thing I do is I say, let's create the silver. Now the silver for this one, because we have multiple dates, there's a little trick I'm going on here. When you looked at this lake house, and it's going to come up in a second, we can see that I chose the dates to be integer based, okay? So even though the characters, they're really integers, so they can be sortable, right? So we know that 0323 is always greater than 0319. That's March 19th, March 23rd. So if I go ahead and say select star from table where max of the folder name is going to get me the most recent data. So again, typically, getting back to design pattern, bronze will have multiple versions of the data, say if it was like a reference data, and silver will have the latest version. Okay, that's what this is doing. Okay? We're going to run all right now, and I'm going to show you that we can do this through here, and then I'm going to show you the pipeline, how it was put together, and then we'll run the whole thing through the pipeline. Is there any questions?
Nothing yet, John.
Okay, cool. So we can see this is first doing the header. So it got the data because, you know, we're not passing anything from ADF to here, Data Factory. So guess what? It's just picked it up and it's going to go through and it's going to say, hey, yeah, I created a temporary view called full. We can't see it anywhere else, but it is in here. Once I shut the cluster down, it's gone. Then what's doing is the Spark job is running and it's going to go here and it's going to create a table, a Hive table. And if we hit refresh, guess what? The Hive table shows up. Awesome. And this will have multiple versions. And when this is done, I'll show you. We'll do a quick little debug. And then we'll go on to the next example. We can see, you know, this has been, this is still running, right? So this is creating the bronze. It just finished. And now this one's running, right? And we can go put this down here. And they have a lot of things here. Like this is their way in which they're executing a plan to how to do this. So they got some Java, right? and they got some, don't even know what this is, but the only thing I can tell you, it's Scala, right? It's telling you how many rows were processed, so on, say. This one created the bronze count, so we can see that if we look at the bronze count, that there is this, right? So 2.9 million. That's a lot. And this one is 64,000 distinct if it's the most recent, okay? And if we hit refresh, we query this, we'd see that data, okay? Let's close these two out, and I'm going to show you how you put a pipeline together, okay? So let's go to, get rid of this one too. That's gone. Okay, so in the bundle that you get, you're going to get the JSON. Right now, there's really no way to export and import pipelines other than going behind the scenes and grabbing the JSON, okay? I'm going to show you, go over the notebooks, and then we're going to kick it off and maybe multitask, do a little more. So we can see, what does this do? It takes an integer. What does an integer mean? It's the pipeline ID. It's whatever pipeline I want to do. And there's a variable called subfolder name. So what it's going to do is it's first going to look this up, right? It's going to do look up against the VentureWorks and metadata, okay? And if you preview the data, it's actually going to pull. This is something that, I hope in the future I need to put a enhancement. I haven't been too busy to ask the product team. I'd love to see them have the ability to say, hey, guess what? Can you do that and also filter by the pipeline ID? If so, I wouldn't have to do this for each and if statement. I'll show you how it runs, okay? So this one, we can see there's a pipeline ID here, and there's each one of these, right? So this is the data we saw before in the Delta table. And what we're going to do is once we get it, we're just going to, remember, we want to copy to a new subdirectory. So subfolder name is going to be year, month, and day, right? So today, almost flipping over for you, it's 4/9, right, 2024. Then I say for each row, now I'm getting too many rows, but I only want to run one, okay? I have to do an if statement, and I say if it's the correct ID, then do the following. And it's very simple. This data is coming from a storage container on 2023 right here, right? You can see it's there. And then there's a container name and a file name. So if we look, okay, back to our original example, I said, oh yeah, we have this up here because there's a reason. Well, the reason is this is our container, right? And inside the container, sales LT, dim currency, and there's your CSV file. So that's where we're pulling in. So if we pulled in facts, it would be a fact table there, right? But all of it's coming from here, okay? Once that's done, it's copied over. This is the next place that I suggested they need to make the product team needs to make adjustment, is that this is perfect. We can call a notebook from here, but the problem is the notebook is bound, okay, to a lakehouse. So this is my workspace, right? And so if I pin this full load to more than one lakehouse, it's going to get confused. It's just going to pick whatever the last pin is, and it might not be the one you're executing. So you probably also want to have, hey, not only do I want to do this, but I want it against the lake house for AdventureWorks, not the lake house for stocks, right? And if I run this, this is going to run once. I'm going to show you the master pipeline, which means that this would be a child, and the master or the parent would be just called multiple times because I want to do everything, right? So that's a very simple, set the integer to 1 and count to 11, right? And this is all it does, call it, increment it. The interesting thing, there's a new, two new things. One is they didn't have this, and I thought this is better than sliced bread. Okay, and work. Do you know what I'm going to do right here? That's better than sliced bread.
What are you going to do right now, John?
I'm going to deactivate it. Remember, we used to be able to do that in SSIS. You can deactivate pieces of the pipeline now. That is so cool, isn't it? So this is like one of the things I want there. Also, they increased the number of components that you can do to 80. Okay, before there was a limit of 40. So those are two really good enhancements that it came up with. So at this point, we have it ready here, right? I'm just going to click and run. And I'm going to say you have unsaved change. I don't want to change anything. So let's close out it, close and discard. I'll come back. Where was it? Refresh AdventureWorks. And what we're going to do is we're going to get one more copy. So we're going to hit run. And I'm going to go back to the lake house really quickly and show you what's going to happen. So if we go to my workspace, okay, and we go to the lake house, which is here, okay, and we go into RAW and we go into Sales LT and DIM, right, there's going to be a new directory. It's going to show up here. Once that shows up, then we're going to move on to the next item. And so not there yet. Hit refresh. Let me go back to the other one. Hopefully it's still running. Yes, it is. Okay, let's call this. Okay. Okay, in progress. Let's try this input. So basically pipeline ID is once here. Output doesn't tell me what it is. Okay, so this is the run. Okay, so we click on the output. This is going to show us the run. And this is running here. And if we bring it up, we can see, remember I told you it was going to call a bunch of them and then find one that actually hit? There was 11 calls because we have 11 different IDs, but we couldn't filter that delta table that's coming in from the lake house, right? It's not, we don't have that capability yet. So right here, we can just hit refresh, and it's kind of wasteful, but only takes a second because they'll run in parallel. It took 5 seconds. It said, hey, guess what? I got 11 of them, but there's really one, right? And this one, basically, it already finished calling the copy, and right now it's actually calling the notebook, right? And so if we go to the notebook, where's the input? So this input is here, and we can see this is the value. So this is our path, right? And that's our table and so on. And so if we multitask and go back here, hopefully we get a new directory. And if we hit refresh, there we go. There's our new directory. There's our currency. And then if we hit refresh here, eventually these two will show up, okay? So while that demo's going in the background, let's look at the other one. The other one was talking about creating shortcuts in the stock data, okay? It's going to run that in the background. We're going to open up another one. Hopefully we won't blow it up. So under my workspace, right, we have this S&P 500. Let's go take a look. So S&P 500, we got two things here called links right here. We can see them. What do those do? Well, the links, okay, allow you, okay, to link in the raw table. So before, remember I had to do a copy? I'm not doing a copy now, right? I'm doing a link. And from the link, I can actually see the sales LT dim currency. So now I don't have to do copies, right? And let's see if I can find the notebook that goes with this. Great metadata, clear hive table. I think that this is it. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we want to make sure it's S&P 500, okay? And what we can do is we could run full no history. This basically just runs it the old way. But clean up. Okay, this is what I want to tell you. So right here, okay, there's stocks right here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that table so we can put a piece of code in here, right? Percent spent, and what we're going to do is we're just going to rebuild it, okay? So we'll do drop table. And again, these are not really dropping the table unless it's a, managed table. In this case, it is. So I'm probably dropping the table, but I'm going to drop table and then stocks, but the data is still where we got it from, so it's not going away. And I'm just going to hit, if you do Control Enter, it just runs a job. Hopefully you'll find a workspace, some compute right here. Said see standard session, said start in 4 seconds, and hopefully it drops it and it'll be gone. We can see here, this was a describe extended on that table. We can see it's managed, right? And in fact, if we open this up, I don't know if we can get to it. That is where it's being stored. It's actually being stored in some place container, which we probably don't have access. under tables under stock, okay? Okay, so it said it finished, and so one thing you're gonna have to do is hit refresh because this sometimes doesn't stay in sync. So just make sure every time you do something like that, hit back and refresh. Let's see if we can even query the other ones because I don't remember how I created those and it's been a little while. So let's do just like I did below. Let's do this, but do it on those other two tables, and then I'll show you how to build from there. Okay, so this one right here, we're gonna do under bronze underscore stocks. So come on, bronze underscore stocks, right? 2013 underscore full, right? Let's describe that. Okay, so we can see right here, it's a managed file and it's Delta 2. So I don't know where that came in, but did I load that one here? Let me look. Had a couple loads up here. I skipped over them, but this is 17, right? 16, right? And that's load no history. So this is loading it with no history. And this is going to the raw stocks, right? S&P 1200. So yeah, this might work. So why don't we do this? We're going to drop this. And we'll drop the other one. And again, you can see you can either use the GUI. It doesn't tell you, like, you can't do this in Databricks. You can't right click and drop. You have to write some code. So the tables are gone, but they're not really gone. How do you create a shortcut might be the first thing. Say, hey, John, you really want the shortcuts. How do you get that? Well, if I remember right, that's New Lake House. Is it going to allow me to do this here? Let me say files. There's two types of shortcuts. You can say, copy, new subfolder. That's not where it is. It's one of these. Let me find it. I thought it was right on the files, but upload, no, that's new subfolder, tables, no, and it's not here, add lakehouse. Okay, so this is another one of those things in which I'm like, okay, I know it's somewhere there, but I didn't bring it in, so pipeline, I can't get rid of the refresh. Remind me not to kill that guy because this guy's still running, right? Yep. So that guy's still running, so I want to get rid of him, get rid of this guy, go to workspace again, and bring this up. Hopefully I will have the option this time. Okay, right there. So see, sometimes you just have to get out and get back in. It suddenly works. So if I want to create a new shortcut, this is something where they need to put some new, more work in because you can't see or modify existing shortcuts. And I'm looking forward to the product group going ahead and change it. But we can say, hey, guess what? We have DFS core, right? And we know that it's John, right? And then hit next, right? And then now we can pick a directory, right? So I can pick another directory, say if I want to mount raw or something, okay? But it kept track of it before, okay? And if I remember right, I'm using a shared access signature, okay? So that's how I did the actual shortcut, okay? To leverage the shortcut, two ways to do it. We can go ahead and just run a notebook and read the files in and create a table. And that's what I'm going to do on one. The other ones, we can also use a short set syntax to go ahead and say, hey, guess what? I'm only going to point to the Delta file in this directory and just load it, please. Okay. So I'll show you both syntax for those and we'll go on to the next topic. So where am I? MySpace. Okay. And it wasn't metadata, it was mesh shortcuts. There we go. Okay, this is the same notebook that you saw. The only difference is it says no history. Remember when we went from one to another, we kept history? It's automatically just going to pick the most recent, okay? So I'm going to run this one cell right here. And we'll click the lake house, and hopefully it's going to load the lake house. And then in your own time, you can run all of them if you want to reload the data. It's just CSV data of the S&P 500 stocks that I pulled down from Amazon a long time ago. I did this back when I was teaching 2013, 14, 15, all the way to 17. So I think it was 16 I started doing this. So it's thinking. There's an interesting thing here too, which I noticed, and you have to kind of look around. There is a way, if I go back to workspaces, is it workspace or is it under, and again, I am learning this interface just like you. So if I make some stupid mistakes, you know why. Right here, you can schedule notebooks too. So not only can you schedule it through ADF, but say if I want to schedule it here, I can. And it's kind of like the cron job, okay? Start and end time, and that's it, and how you repeat it. So that's something that's interesting that you can't do in Synapse, I think. And this is the mesh, right? So we'll run this, and we're waiting for us to come, and if we hit refresh, nope. So it said succeeded. Okay, there we go. So there's our two tables. And then if you're curious, right, we had some temporary code I did down here, like describe this. I can go over here and just say, let's take a look at it, right? So I can say %, SQL, and then select star from, right? And then bronze, underscore stocks, underscore 2013, underscore full, right? And I just want a limit of 5 records, right? And if we hit that, we can see the first 5 records. Awesome, right? And we can see that came from, like, this one is the company symbol's Ben, and it comes from a file called Ben under the folder S&P 2013. And we got a load date. The other way I said is you can read right from the file and create it. Another way is you can go ahead and create a table definition. I thought I had it in here. So I saw all those. Where is it? It's not this one. Oh yeah, this is another thing I want to show you. So let me see if I can run the rest of these because they seem pretty quick. What, 18 seconds or 45? Let me find the other code while it's running. That's not it. That's not it. That's not it. This is it right here. Sorry. Another way to do it is we can say, hey, guess what? We're going to create a directory called temp, or a table called temp underscore, or I don't know. Let's call it stage stocks, right? And what we can do is we can say select star from, and if we save the bronze files as a Delta file, which I did, you can just pull it in, right? And so if we go ahead and we run this, it's going to create a table using the Delta file format. And path is not found. Why does it not found it? File bronze. Oh, I maybe moved it. Stocks. Try this again. Probably moved it. Because I always write and probably move something around. There we go. That was easy peasy. It's just basically adding metadata, right? Come on. And now I should be able to probably do a limit. Maybe it didn't finish. Limit 5. And this, I changed the name, so we need to change this to stg underscore. There we go. So one way to do it is to say create table as, select directly from the Delta, figuring there's a mount point right on the files. Another way is to run a notebook, which I did, which basically does spark.read, creates all the files. And what I was doing is hopefully going to show you something. So 14's there, 15's there. Probably not going to get through as much as everything, but I want to run 2 more and create a view, and then we go on to the next topic. I want to show you something that's really important. The main thing is this, is that you can create managed and unmanaged tables. Managed is the default, meaning that it worries about where it's going to start. That is the only thing that will show up in the SQL endpoint. Also, views created in the Lakehouse do not show up on the SQL endpoint. And that's something to be really cognizant of, because you might be like, oh, I created a view. Why isn't it showing up? And the reason why it's not supported is that the syntax, okay, for Spark is a lot bigger than the syntax, okay, for especially SQL syntax, right, for SQL Server. And therefore, they opted not to support it, okay? It'd been nice to say, hey, guess what? We'll support anything as long as it doesn't use any keywords that, our, SQL endpoint doesn't understand. Okay, this one's done. Let's run this one, and I'm going to create the view and show you the view works, but we can't actually do anything with it. Not if we're going to do it from run this guy. So hopefully this guy's done. He's still running. Hopefully this guy kicks in after him. Looks like he's done. So hit refresh. So now you got them all. I'm going to create a view, right? So now if we go over here and hit refresh, look, the view doesn't even show up. It's a bug. Okay, it's done though. I can use the view. It's right here. This is one of the bugs I logged with Microsoft. Did it finish running this? It said it did it. So select star from, did I call it? Make sure I got the name there. Drop view, lake house, gold stock data, right? So let's hit refresh. And select star from and run this one more time. And if not, that is something weird. Maybe they've totally got rid of it now. That is weird. So I did do if make view. Oh, wait a minute. Dope. Gotta look at my code. I was playing around with certain things. If make view, then what it tries to do is I turned it so it wouldn't work because sometimes I just want to run the whole thing. So this one's going to do it. Okay. It's getting too complex. Sorry. Here we go. So we can see this is here, and hopefully it will come back with 5 records. Okay, awesome, 5 records. The only problem is, guess what? We're going to multitask and go back to our... Did it shut down my VM on me, or did it not? It might have did. Okay, I don't see the VM, so maybe the VM got shut down on me. I apologize. I'll show you really quickly on the SQL endpoint. If we go, this guy's still running. This guy still running. So I'll let him run and get rid of this guy, get rid of this guy, and I need to show you the endpoint for this guy. So this semantic model, this is our endpoint, right? And if we go to endpoint, we can see everything shows up. We can click views. There's nothing in the views, right? We can say new query, right? And it was gold, right? So select star from gold underscore, and what was the name of it? Getting a little tired. Where is it? Mesh view data cuts, that's what it is. And this one is called gold stock data, okay? So now we're gonna go back to, I think it's this guy. Yes, it is. And go here and now run this. And guess what? It doesn't understand what it is. But we saw everything else shows up, right? If we go into DBO and the tables, we can see all the tables there. Guess what? We go into view and that view doesn't show up. However, if we decide to take that view definition and create it here, it would show up here and it would be at the SQL endpoint. It would just be querying the actual Delta tables, okay? So let's go back to the deck because we got a lot left to cover and I'm running behind. Okay, so let's hide the presenter view and go on. So at this point, one lake, uniform architecture, warehouse SQL syntax, and 2 examples. So why did I say that the Delta format is at the heart of this? You can see right here, it's the one lake. And guess what? When we do data warehousing, it stores the data in one lake, which is a Delta Parquet. If you do in Spark, it's a Delta Parquet. If you do in KQL, it's a Delta Parquet. I can keep on going, but we can see it's just basically the one lake, okay? Warehouse syntax. Basically, core objects of tables, right? Views, functions, store procedures. Okay, default and check constraints are not supported. Primary and foreign keys, you can make them, but the only thing it's going to do is going to enforce the way you can delete stuff. No order incremental columns, okay? Alter table is not supported. So if you create a table and it's wrong and you want to change it, you have to drop it and reload it. Limited support for system views and store procedures. Okay, refer to documentation when developing, especially with the T-SQL syntax that's limited. Use data factory to ingest, that's one way, or the copy into syntax, okay? Examples, we're going to talk about the publisher's database was available in SQL Server 7. Reduced SQL syntax script. So I basically took the script and reduced it so it would work. Ingest stock data, right? We're going to create a schema instead of database, create table definition, and then we're going to copy into, and we're going to load hundreds of files, okay? So we're going to go back to data engineering. And I'm going to close out of this guy and going to leave that one. I'm pretty sure it's still running. Or did it finish? Hey, it finished, it said. Let's go take a quick look and I'll show you it's there. And then we did a really good job. So my workspace, this is the VentureWorks, and we should have all the tables. And now we can see we have a ton of tables, right? We got currency, customer, date, geography, product, subcategory, and all our fact tables. So everything, I think it's 11 tables. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 is right. I loaded same amount for the silver, okay? And we can see that we have multiple versions, right? If we went to sales LT, this might be something like a reference table you would have in which 49 is the current day I ran, but it has all this data in the bronze and only the most recent in the silver, okay? So I'm going to close that one out for good, and we're going to go to the pubs database, okay? Cool beans. Got a bunch of stuff here. One of the things you can do is, it's kind of annoying, but at the same time it's cool, is if you open up a query and you do it, it just keeps it, okay? So I kept the one that says drop objects. And I'm going to say, guess what? I just want to get rid of all these objects. Let's run it. Wow. Guess what? Got no more tables now. No more views. That's that schema. We also have a stock schema, right? So let's see. Okay. Tables. So we have in the stocks, we have this S&P 500 table, right? So what I'll do is I'll do a new query and we'll get rid of that, and then we'll load both of them up. Okay, so this new query, drop table, right? And then stocks. Again, remember, there's this pubs, like in a regular database, you have multiple databases in here. This is a database object. You can have multiple schemas, okay? You can do cross database stuff. I don't know how good it is right now, so something to be cognizant of. This ecosystem's still growing, so I haven't tried it out yet. S&P 500. The cool thing is that it's pretty quick for what it is. So boom. And guess what? Now we have no S&P 500 table. Okay, cool. Let's take a quick look at the create database query. So this is the down here. There's a make data warehouse. Okay, well, this is actually the original script from pubs, but I just updated it. It actually does do raise error, which is kind of cool. Puts a message out. These are create tables. There's an alter, and I'm just going to go through it, but we'll boom, boom, boom. We got a bunch of crates, and then what we're going to do is we're going to do a load, and here's our inserts, okay? Now, the interesting thing is I'm making this restartable, so you delete before you run the inserts, okay? What were their changes? The interesting thing is it does support, you can see, excuse me. Is anyone talking? Okay, so you can see right here that it does support extended characters. One of the things I did notice is that when use hex, okay, you basically have to put it in 0x, right? I think that was pretty much the same, but there was some errors in there, meaning that before there was integrity errors that were just covered up. They are not so covered up when you use the data warehouse, right? Because it wanted something as a default value. Interesting thing also is dollar signs are working here, right? Okay, so the syntax is going to be a little different. I'm just going to run this, and this is going to build it in the background, okay? Come on. What is wrong? There we go. I don't know why it didn't run it. And if we go over here and take a look, right? This is bringing it up in DBO. And if we look at tables, right? Refresh. There we go, got all the tables. And now it's just probably loading data. So again, is this as blinding fast as maybe SQL Server? Maybe not, but it does use a Parquet file, so that means you're going to get really good compression. Okay, and I don't know what the limits of this, system are. When you allocate Fabric, you have to pick some type of compute, a SKU, and if you have it like an F64, this is probably going to be pretty big. But let's let that run. I'm going to go through some more slides, and then we'll see if we can wrap up because I don't have much more left to talk about. So we're going to go back and talk about the copy into. It's probably like the best thing since sliced bread to me for getting stuff into a data warehouse. I love it. Kusa database. We're not going to have time to go over it. I'm just going to talk about it. If you have chance, go look at the examples. I'm going to be updating. I'm not pleased with what I have, but maybe in a month it should be the way I want it. So basically choose a real-time service. So I had basically event hub, valid sources, right? So KQL, what is it? It's a database, right? Load structure, unstructured streaming. Once it's in there, use the Kusto query language, right? There's also query set. So this is something that could be a shareable with visuals, and there's event stream. And that's more, they're going to be doing a lot of new development here. So I'm just going to let you keep track of this. It's just a good introduction. Please look at the publications that show them because things are going to change in the future. And the two examples I would have is a soda machine, right? And this is basically just pumping sample data in. This one would also be a snack machine, okay? But the only difference, it would be saving as Avro data down to a data lake, and then you can load it in a table. So this one's loading directly from Event Hub. This is loading from, stuff that's landed into a data lake, but it's Avro. And I'm going to skip past that, and that's about it. Let's go back, and then we'll wrap up. So I ran this, and now we have a bunch of data, and let's see if it's there. So if we go ahead, new query, select 100, boom, that's 100 rows, right? It might not even be 100, so it's probably only 6. So there's our data. Yeah, take a look at it. Like I said, I had to make some changes to actually get this to work. Let's look at, okay, copy into. Okay, so this is my storage key, so don't go ahead and stop breaking things on me. But this is going to say, okay, delete from stocks, okay, drop table of exists, we're going to create a new table. So we're going to create a new table, you can run a piece of it, right? Boom. This is another bug I logged, okay? So this bug is really interesting. See, this is copy into, so we have, I have the secret right here, so I have rights to get to it. And this is a correct directory, S&P 500, and I want to load all CSV files, right? So I'm going to highlight this, okay, and I'm going to run this. And what's going to do is going to say, guess what? There's no data. What do you mean there's no data, right? I'm getting old, but there has to be data there, right? And so if we go back and we look at stocks, right, we have S&P, there's data there. And what it is that the data warehouse team, when they made it, they didn't realize that you can use ampersands and dashes and all types of fun stuff in ADLS Gen 2 for storage. But when they read it in, they don't understand it. So I went back and said, okay, let's create stocks and do Y year 2013. Right? And eventually it's going to show up, I hope. I didn't delete the data. I don't know why it's not showing up right away. It's not a good sign. Is everyone still here? Work, you still here?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
almost done. I'm about to wrap up. So let's try this one more time. That was really weird. You saw that, huh? So try, okay, there it is. So the data's there, but now I got different names, right? Check this out. You can't do this. I'm going to close this. You don't need that. You can't do this before, but now you can. I'm going to load 2,600 files with just a little SQL statement. Boom. There we go. And it's running. And isn't that awesome? And now, I don't know, I never tried doing multitasking on it, have two windows at once. So it hasn't committed it yet. So it's still, this guy's still running. See right here? And the messages. Okay. So while that runs, I'm going to wrap up and then we can talk. There's a lot of good links here and you can ask any questions you want. What is Microsoft Fabric? It's the one-stop shop for all your data and analytics needs. As a developer, you can pick an architecture. I showed you architectures. It can be a lakehouse, a warehouse. Machine learning, we didn't go into. We didn't get to Cusco because there's just not enough time. That's why I've always left it to last, unless the user group wants me to keep on talking. I did not use how to use Copilot. A lot of stuff, Copilot's a big thing. Hey, how do I use ChatGPT? How do I use Copilot? You can use it. Problem is you need an F64 SKU, and face value when I discounts around 7, 8K a month. It's really high entry for small and medium customers. So you still have to look at the documentation, still kind of understand what's going on. As you saw during the exploration of the service, I logged several bugs, right? The roadmap for Fabric includes more sources of the data lake as well as expanding the real-time ingestion. I think it's really cool. If you have a good grasp of SQL, Python, and Spark, you're going to be right at home, right? You can do the data engineering, have no problems. If you're familiar with Power BI, guess what? You rounded it out. You can ingest data and report on it. So it's just basically for analytics. A bunch of reference: Data Factory, Lakehouse, Notebooks, Data Warehouse, Custo Database. And at this point, questions and thank you.
Thank you, John. A lot to cover there.
Yeah, I know. And there's so much, and I didn't get all of it. And let me show you one last thing, and then I will stop talking, and we'll see if there's any. I told you I loaded a bunch of files, right? And if we go here and we say select star from, and then I'm just going to do a count. I think there's 600,000 rows that I just loaded, and it was pretty it was pretty painless, right? It took 1 minute and 40 seconds to go through 2,500 files and load 600,000 rows. Yep, 635,817 rows. Pretty amazing. So most of the things that you spoke about with, migrating your data to OneLake, placing it into Parquet files and being able to go over the top of that to access that data. Is that the preferred approach, or is there still a reason or a desire to put things into the data warehouse, the Fabric data warehouse? Yeah, I don't know at this point. I'm getting confused with the messaging because initially it was ADF, and then it was Synapse ADF, and now we have Fabric ADF. So a lot has changed in 5 years. If I was a betting man, I tell you this, is that one of the things that I think they gave Databricks a run for the money, and like I told you, I just recently talked to a Databricks contact today, and he's like, "Oh yeah, serverless pools are coming out for Databricks because they're basically Microsoft raised the bar with those starter pools, and which boom, they come up in like seconds, and Databricks had to respond, and so I think that's why that's coming out to market. So it's kind of good, regardless if you currently have an ecosystem that has Databricks or you're going to Fabric, they're competing now, so you're going to see some really cool innovation coming out. I don't know. It depends on data movement. Data movement we know is expensive, right? And so the question is, do you need a copy of it in the Fabric, or can you get to it through a shortcut, right? If a shortcut's good enough, and then use the data to like maybe aggregate the data and stick like the results in the lake, and that's where you're really worried about, then maybe you just leave the data where it is. and you put the analytics result into the Fabric data warehouse to do reporting off, right? But if you want everything to, like Lord of the Rings, right? I got the ring in Tolkien, and want everything in one ring, right? Which is Fabric. Then yes, you could actually migrate it into the storage. But the problem is it's its own storage. It's like it's proprietary. It's not like you're seeing it, and that's why I'm just cautious. Like I kind of like having the ability to do the shortcut, and even if it's just the ADLS, because I know that if something happens to my Fabric environment, goes down, I can burn it down and tear it back up. ADLS is going to have 3 copies for me, and if I geo replicate it, I'll have 6, and that's going to save my bacon. But if you put it in a lake and something happens, someone does drop database. Who knows?
Comes down to administration who has appropriate permissioning to manage and maintain that environment.
Definitely.
Okay.
And we haven't even gotten to like all the fun stuff, but behind it, it looks like Office 365. If you're adding new users to it, it's 365. There's a lot of 365 panels in there. There's a lot of Power BI panels in there too. So if you're at home, like work, you probably did this in old days like me, SharePoint administration. I don't put it on my resume, but it's out there. I don't want to do it. Please don't call me for SharePoint stuff, Then yeah. But stay tuned. There's a lot of stuff going in here. I'll be writing about it and trying to keep pace with all the changes that Microsoft's doing. And, again, what's a use case? I think there's a really good use case for small to medium sized companies if they get the price point down. And, they kept on pushing Copilot. Remember that, Martin? Copilot this and Copilot that. You don't need Copilot. If you take a few of these patterns I gave you and just learn them, you can do a lot without Copilot,
Any other questions from anybody? Feel free to raise your hand, put it in the chat window. Take this opportunity to ask your questions now. Yes, you can come back and rewatch this on the Data Platform Downunder YouTube channel, but watching that doesn't give you the opportunity to ask the question now. So if you do have any questions, then put those in. Otherwise, we'll give you a couple of minutes. Otherwise, a big thank you to John for giving up his time. I know it is quite late for John and presenting to us this month on Fabric. Martin and I are looking for a new session for next month, so stay tuned. We will get a couple of sessions lined up to kickstart the rest of the year. So looks like we've got a couple of people typing in the chat window, so we may have some curly questions coming for you, John.
Awesome. So cool. And I have a question to Martin, since he's just sitting there, and he actually went with you to Las Vegas, which I didn't get a chance to go. Did they release the data gateway for regular pipelines?
Yeah, they did.
They did. So I'm gonna have to go play with that then.
I don't know if you actually released it or if it's in public preview. But they definitely talked about it. Cool. For me, that's been a blocker for like a lot of people to use pipelines for a long time. The other big blocker was pipelines in CI/CD. They definitely fixed that. You can now put your pipelines in Azure DevOps. Them two things combined, what I feel were huge blockers for people. And now that they've been resolved, it's looking a lot more promising. And I think some of the things will get resolved a lot more over the next 6 months, year or so. So it's pretty good. I don't know if obviously we're based in Brisbane here. Patrick LeBlanc was at one of the user groups in Brisbane last night, giving a bit of an update on all these things. And I think he'll probably come back again, or certainly the guys in the cube will come back definitely next year to do the same thing, but maybe in the meantime. So keep your eye on them, and we'll keep you posted if we hear anything.
Yeah,
So,
I'm reading about 3 topics this year, and so if you want me to come back later on and talk about it, I can. I'm learning about PostgreSQL. I think PostgreSQL is really cool. Also, guess what? You save on licensing. And so if you're a small and medium-sized company and you're looking to save on licensing, take a look at PostgreSQL. Microsoft has offerings, AWS, and Google does too. But go ahead. Sorry about that, Warwick.
So, John, I did say that, we might get a curly question, and Andrew has put one in saying,
Yeah, I
so if
saw
you've just
that one.
signed up for a 3-year lock-in for Synapse, what's the chances of getting out of it and into a 3-year lock-in for Fabric? Personally, I can't answer that.
Where is my? This is unfortunately, it's only a tape measure. I wish I had my magic ball. I could shake it and say maybe. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because first of all, I reckon you probably could get out of your 3-year licensing agreements. But the second part of that question is, I don't know if you can lock yourself into 3 years on Fabric. I did a presentation at SQL Bits about 2 months ago, and one of the questions that came up in there was how long you could lock yourself in for. And there were people in the room who knew a lot more about it than me. The answer was you could only lock yourself in for a year. So unless things have changed in the last 2 months or so, or maybe 6 weeks, I don't know if you can lock yourself in for 3 years. But assuming you could, I reckon you could easily get out of your agreement. That's just my personal opinion.
So, Ravinder.
Yep.
Fantastic question. So, if being a small company, have a system being developed using existing tech, e.g. Synapse notebooks, PySpark, is it wise to think about migrating to Fabric? The other thing to consider is the current pipelines within VNet/subnet. I guess, like anything, before I hand over to John to answer that, like anything, I guess the bigger picture is you've got to look at what are you trying to achieve and what is the driving factor for you going to Fabric. Okay, so we had a number of these questions in Vegas. So I was on the Ask the Experts tables, and we had a lot of people coming up going, oh, how do we migrate to Fabric? What do we need to do to get from A to B, etc.? And even with the Microsoft staff who were also on the tables, the question was always asked, why? What are you trying to achieve, right? So yes, it's a product that provides fantastic capabilities for you, but you need to understand what it is you're doing, what Fabric can provide for you, what's the benefits of going down that track, okay? So that question is a really big question to try and answer, but I'll hand it over to John and he'll be able to provide some further input.
So let's use another word, and I'm not being derogative of Fabric, but it's kind of like data lake for dummies, okay? So that VNet subnet thing, you don't get control over that anymore. They might be putting it in, but right now it's just their system. It's just like Power BI. It's there. You don't get to say, hey, I want these IPs. I want to do this type of network. It's not that complex. It's a box already, and you get to play inside the box. That's it. And so that is one thing you will be losing is control of some things, right? And that's another reason why I said I like shortcuts really good, because I could have other processes put the data in the lake, and if I do a shortcut, I can have the storage disassociated with Fabric. And if Fabric melts, I can go back to Databricks. I can go to something else. I don't care as long as I have my data, right? My Parquet files. But yeah, that's one of the things interesting is like once you start using the warehouse, it's in the lake. It's in the Fabric lake, not the one lake. It's not the other lake. The really cool thing I do like about it is I showed you that one lake shortcut, right? And that is really cool. If you have some people that are like doing Excel or just CSV files, and you say, hey, drop it in this folder and run this job, and suddenly data will show up in your Power BI report. Rock on. I mean, that's self-serve for the low end, users. There is some real nice advantages over this version though, but there's some bugs in this version too. So for instance, I tried to create 1,369 folders. Why did I come up with that number? Because it's the weather data set. And guess what? In Fabric, it blew up. It didn't keep on counting. In Synapse, it handled it because it used the old-fashioned paging of technologies, right? You had little buttons over there, and if you couldn't go any farther, it was still thinking, and at the very end, you could go to the last page, right? So that's one particular bug. But one thing that is a bug kind of like in Synapse, but it's not in Fabric, is Synapse. When you start up a cluster and it's attached to a notebook, it's very sticky, right? There's no way to detach it. You can't reuse it. You have to pretty much kill the cluster and then stop another cluster for the other notebook. That's seamless. That they fixed that in this version. So that's a tough question. You got to weigh all the things. Like, okay, are you thinking about going cross cloud? If you're doing cross cloud, then Databricks is still the leader, right? If you think that you're going to be getting stuff from other clouds, that's fine. But on the flip side, if you do a lot of reporting in Power BI, and with these new shortcuts, right, the mesh, right, that data mesh, maybe you want to stay with Fabric. So no easy answer. And that's why you're shaking your head, right?
Okay. So with that, if there's no more questions, then big thank you to John, big thank you to Martin, big thank you to everybody who has joined for this session. I hope you did get a lot out of this. As we mentioned, this will be made available on the Data Platform Downunder YouTube channel that you can come back and watch at any point in time. So a big thank you to everybody. Enjoy, and we look forward to hosting you all and seeing you all again in a month's time.
Take care, folk, and have a great night. I'm going to go to bed.
Stop.